The rain poured down in sheets, soaking everything it touched. She stood on the cracked sidewalk, her small frame trembling as she hugged her child close. The little boy, no more than 4, buried his face into her shoulder, shivering from both cold and fear. The water dripped from her hair and ran down her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, racing, searching for a way out of the mess she had found herself in. They had left the apartment hours earlier, hoping to escape the leaking ceiling and the smell of mold that had taken over their tiny space. The landlord had refused to fix anything, and her pleas for help had gone unanswered. She thought maybe if she could just get a few hours away, the boy could breathe, even for a little while. But the storm had other plans, drenching them completely and forcing her to hold him tighter for warmth. She looked around, but the street was empty. The few people who had been out had disappeared quickly, seeking shelter wherever they could. Street lights flickered under the heavy downpour, casting ghostly shadows on the wet pavement. Every droplet that fell seemed louder than the last, echoing her anxiety. She tried to steady her breathing, telling herself it was just rain, just another bad day, but it felt bigger than that. It felt like the world was against her, pressing down on her shoulders in the same way the sky was pressing down with water. Her mind wandered to what had led her here. Just a few months ago, life had felt different. She had a job, a place to call home, a sense that things would get better. But then everything slipped through her fingers. She lost her job unexpectedly, the bills piled up, and soon she found herself making impossible choices every day. Food or electricity, rent or medicine. And now, standing on the cold, wet sidewalk, it felt like she had failed her child in the most basic way. She glanced down at him, noticing the way his tiny hands clutched at her coat, desperate for warmth and comfort. His eyes were wide, reflecting both trust and confusion. He didn't understand why they were out here, why his mother couldn't find a dry place, why the world seemed so cold. She tried to smile through her own despair, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll find somewhere soon. I promise." But even as she spoke, she doubted the truth of her words. Every few minutes, she shifted her weight, trying to ease the strain in her legs. The boy rested his head on her chest, heavy and wet, and she felt a pang in her heart. How had life come to this? She had dreams once, dreams of a better future, a safe home, a life where her child didn't have to see her struggle so hard just to keep them alive. And now, here they were, standing in the rain, invisible to the people rushing past in their cars. Invisible to the world that seemed to ignore their pain. She thought of asking for help. Maybe someone would notice. Maybe someone would offer them a place to stay. But pride held her back. She had always been independent, always tried to handle things on her own. The thought of admitting defeat, of asking a stranger for help, felt unbearable. Yet she knew she couldn't stay out here forever. Her mind raced with options, each one seeming more impossible than the last. As the minutes stretched on, her body grew numb, but she refused to move. The rain was relentless, and each drop felt like a reminder of all the things she had lost, all the time she had been forced to fight alone. She hugged her child closer, feeling his small body tremble against hers. She whispered to him, telling him stories of sunshine and laughter, trying to drown out the sound of the storm and the fear in his eyes. She painted pictures with words, hoping to shield him from the reality of their situation. Even if only for a moment, the street seemed to stretch endlessly. And with every step she imagined a way out, a place where they could finally rest. She thought of the shelters she had passed before, the ones that were always full or closed when they arrived. She thought of the benches under awnings, the doorways of businesses, anywhere they could find a moment of dry safety. But the rain had other plans, washing away hope with every drop. She remembered the times before everything went wrong, when the boy laughed freely, when they played in the park, when life felt lighter. She clung to those memories like lifelines, reminders that there was joy somewhere, even if it seemed unreachable now. The sound of the rain was harsh, but she tried to listen for the little moments of beauty too, the smell of wet earth, the rhythm of drops against metal and pavement, the way her child's hair smelled after getting soaked. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. Her feet ached, her clothes stuck to her skin, and yet she didn't dare stop. Each step was an act of courage, each movement a promise to her child that they would survive this night. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know where they would sleep or how they would eat, but she moved forward anyway. That was all she could do. Somewhere in the distance, she saw a faint glow, a light that promised warmth, even if only for a moment. She started walking toward it, dragging the boy along, his small legs struggling to keep up. Every time she stumbled, she felt panic rise, but she pushed through it, reminding herself that giving up was not an option. She had a child to protect, a child who trusted her with everything, and that trust was stronger than any fear. As they approached the light, she realized it was a small diner, mostly empty at this late hour. The door was slightly ajar, and the warmth from inside spilled out into the rainy night. She hesitated for a moment, afraid of rejection, afraid of being turned away, but she knew she had no choice. She pushed the door open, and the bell above chimed softly inside. The diner smelled of coffee and fried food, comforting scents that made her stomach ache with hunger. A few patrons looked up, eyes briefly scanning the wet mother and child, but most returned to their meals. She approached the counter, her voice trembling as she asked if she could stay for just a few minutes until the rain let up. The server, a kind woman with tired eyes, nodded and gestured to a booth near the window. They settled into the booth, shaking off the worst of the water. She pulled a small towel from her bag and tried to dry the boy's hair and face. He looked at her with eyes full of wonder and relief, and she felt a lump in her throat. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to breathe, to let a moment of peace wash over her. But even in the warmth of the diner, the weight of their reality pressed down. She knew this was temporary, that the storm outside mirrored the storm in their lives, and that soon they would have to face it all again. She ordered 2 cups of hot chocolate, one for herself and one for him. The boy sipped slowly, his fingers wrapped around the warm mug. She watched him, her heart full of both love and pain. Each smile he gave her was a reminder of why she kept going, why she endured so much. She whispered to him, telling him stories of better days, of sunny skies and laughter, of a world where they didn't have to fear the rain. Time passed, and the rain outside began to ease, though the sky remained heavy with clouds. She knew it wouldn't be long before they had to leave, but for now, she allowed herself to sit and to be human again. She watched the boy, listening to the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of dishes, feeling a fragile sense of hope stir in her chest. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was enough to keep her moving forward. As they prepared to leave the diner, she hugged the boy tightly, feeling his warmth seep into her, giving her strength. The storm had not passed completely, but she had survived it, and she had kept her child safe. That, she decided, was enough for now. Each step back into the wet streets was another act of courage, another testament to her resilience. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she would face it with him, together. Come rain or shine. The rain had finally slowed to a drizzle, leaving the streets wet and glistening under the dim glow of the streetlights. She walked carefully, holding her child's hand tightly, making sure his small steps didn't slip on the slick pavement. The warmth of the diner lingered for a few minutes in their bodies, but reality hit as soon as they stepped back outside. The wind had a sharper bite now, cutting through the thin jacket she wore. She pulled it tighter around her, pressing the boy close. Wishing she could shield him from every discomfort the world threw at them, she thought about her life before the storm hit. Before the job was gone and the bills started piling up, there had been small moments of happiness than weekend walks in the park. Bedtime stories, laughter that filled the tiny apartment. They seemed so far away now, almost like memories from another lifetime. Yet she held on to them, because even faint light could guide them through the darkest night. The boy asked quietly if they could play in a puddle. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Not today, sweetheart," she said, forcing a gentle tone. She couldn't let him get sicker than he already was, couldn't let him have more reasons to cry. Instead, she suggested they find shelter until the sun came out, and maybe they could go to the park tomorrow. The boy nodded, trusting her without question, and that trust both lifted and weighed down on her. As they walked, she noticed the city around them, now transformed by the storm. Trees bent under the weight of water, garbage was washed into the gutters, and the streets shone with reflections of neon signs. She had walked these streets countless times, but tonight, everything felt different. The rain had erased the usual patterns, made the world feel unpredictable, and she felt that same unpredictability in her life. Each step was a question. Would she find a place to sleep? Would she be able to feed her child? Would tomorrow bring another storm? She passed familiar buildings, some still shuttered from the storm, others with warm lights spilling out. She paused briefly in front of one, a small library, and considered going inside. It was closed, but the thought of a safe, dry place where the boy could sit and read or play for a while made her heart ache. Libraries had always felt like portals to another world, a place where troubles faded and imagination took over. She made a mental note to return when it was open. For now, survival came first. She knew she couldn't keep wandering the streets forever. The boy needed sleep, food, and safety. Her mind wandered through the options she had considered before the shelters, the friends who had drifted away, the social programs that always seemed just out of reach. Each option felt like a gamble, a roll of the dice where the odds were stacked against them. Yet she kept moving, because the alternative, giving up, was unthinkable. As she walked, she saw a familiar face. A man in a business suit was crossing the street, umbrella in hand, moving quickly through the drizzle. He seemed focused on something far away, unaware of the wet world around him. She studied him for a moment, noticing the expensive watch on his wrist, the polished shoes, the confident stride. It struck her how different their lives were, how distant his world felt. Yet in that brief glance, she felt a mix of envy and curiosity. How could someone live so comfortably, untouched by the storms that seemed to define her existence? The boy tugged at her hand, bringing her back to the present. He asked where they were going, and she smiled gently. Inventing a story about a hidden garden just ahead, a place where the rain stopped and the sun shone bright. He believed her, as children do, and his eyes lit up with hope. She felt a pang of guilt, because she didn't know if such a place existed. But for now, the story would do. Hope, even imagined, could be enough to carry them forward. They continued down the street, the drizzle turning lighter with each step. She noticed a small cafe with its lights on, a warm glow inviting from inside. The smell of baked bread and coffee wafted out the door, making her stomach growl despite the chocolate from the diner. She considered going in, but fear held her back. She didn't have money, and she didn't want to draw attention to themselves. Pride, stubborn and fierce, kept her moving forward. Survival was not just about warmth or food, it was about dignity. Her mind wandered to the future. She imagined herself working again, a steady job, a small apartment they could call home. She pictured the boy smiling freely, without worry, without seeing her exhausted and anxious all the time. She tried to hold on to that vision, letting it push her forward through the wet streets. Every step, every careful movement, was fueled by that imagined future. Even if it felt distant and fragile, hours seemed to pass without notice. The drizzle faded to mist, and the streets were quiet, except for the soft sound of water dripping from rooftops and trees. The boy yawned, rubbing his eyes, and she felt a pang of concern. They needed to rest soon. She scanned the area, looking for a bench, a doorway, anything that might provide a moment of safety. The city had little to offer for those without money, and yet she refused to give up. There had to be something, somewhere, that could give them a temporary reprieve. She spotted a small community center down the block, its doors slightly ajar. Hope surged in her chest, but caution kept her moving slowly. The doors were unlocked, and the lobby was empty except for a janitor sweeping quietly in the corner. She approached him, explaining their situation in a quiet, careful voice. The man listened, nodded, and offered them a corner of the lobby where they could sit until morning. Relief washed over her like sunlight breaking through clouds. They were safe, at least for now. The boy settled onto a chair, eyes wide with curiosity at the strange new environment. She pulled a blanket from her bag and wrapped it around him, feeling his body relax slightly under the warmth. She sat beside him, letting out a deep breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For a few moments, she allowed herself to simply exist. Free from the constant pressure of finding shelter, food, and safety, she thought about the people they passed earlier. The hurried lives, the ignorance, the indifference. Most of the world seemed unaware of those who struggled in silence, those who faced storms both literal and metaphorical. She wondered if anyone really noticed, if anyone cared. And yet here, in this small corner of the city, a single person had made a difference. The janitor's quiet act of kindness reminded her that even in a world that often seemed harsh, there were small lights, small moments of humanity that could change everything. Night fell completely, and the city took on a hushed, sleepy quality. The boy drifted off to sleep against her shoulder, and she watched him, marveling at his resilience and trust. She felt a mix of pride and sorrow, knowing that every hardship he faced was one she wished she could spare him. Yet even in the darkness, she felt a flicker of hope. They had survived the storm, found temporary shelter, and had each other. That was enough to keep going, enough to face whatever came next. She closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself to rest, even if only for a few minutes. Thoughts of the past, of mistakes, and of lost opportunities faded slightly, replaced by the small victories of the present. She reminded herself that tomorrow would be another challenge, another day of walking through rain or searching for food. But tonight, they were safe. And sometimes, that was the most important thing. Hours passed in quiet, broken only by the occasional noise from the street outside or the creak of the building settling. She stayed awake, watching over the boy, listening to his steady breathing, and feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders once again. It was heavy, but it was also sacred. This child depended on her, trusted her, and for that reason alone, she could not falter. As dawn approached, the first light of morning seeped through the windows. The city outside looked less threatening, bathed in soft shades of gray and gold. The streets glistened with remnants of the night's rain, and the air smelled fresh, carrying a sense of possibility. She woke the boy gently, brushing his hair from his face and whispering promises of breakfast and warmth. His eyes opened slowly, still heavy with sleep, but bright with the faintest hint of hope. They stepped back onto the streets, cautious but determined. The storm had passed, but life's challenges remained. Yet, in her heart, she carried a new resolve. They had faced the rain together, survived its harshness, and found a temporary haven. That experience, small as it might seem to others, had reminded her of her strength, her ability to endure, in the quiet courage that came from loving and protecting another human being. Every step forward was a promise to herself, to the boy, to the small hope that life could still offer moments of safety, comfort, and joy. She knew the path ahead would be difficult, unpredictable, and at times lonely. But she also knew that they would face it together. With each careful movement, she carried the memory of the night spent in the storm, the lessons learned in the quiet of the lobby, in the understanding that even in a harsh world, small acts of humanity could light the way. The city had settled into a calm rhythm as afternoon stretched into evening. She walked with her child along familiar streets, each step measured and careful. The boy clung to her hand, tired but still curious, pointing out small puddles and raindrops that glimmered on car hoods. She smiled at him, grateful for his small joys, even amidst uncertainty. Each moment of laughter or curiosity felt precious. Like a small piece of sunlight breaking through clouds, she thought about the future, and the weight of it pressed on her chest. They needed food, shelter, and stability. She needed a job, some way to rebuild a life that had been unraveled. Each thought brought worry, but she refused to let it paralyze her. Instead, she planned mentally, charting routes, possible shelters, and places where work might be available. Every small detail mattered. She had learned that survival required attention, patience, and creativity. They reached a small park, the benches wet and the playground still slick from rain. The boy wanted to run, and for a brief moment, she let him, holding her breath as he darted across the wet ground. The sound of his laughter was a balm to her own weary heart. She knew it was dangerous, but she also knew that moments like this were rare and worth the risk. As he played, she leaned against a tree, catching her breath, feeling a mixture of pride and exhaustion. She had survived another day and kept her child safe. Nearby, a group of well-dressed people passed by, talking and laughing, their umbrellas shielding them from the remaining drizzle. She watched them for a moment, struck by the contrast between their lives and hers. They seemed so far removed from the struggles of the streets, unaware of the exhaustion and fear that accompanied each step she took. Yet she realized that envy would do her no good. Her focus had to remain on the child at her side, and the small victories that would get them through each day. The boy ran back to her, breathless and smiling. She knelt to his level, brushing his wet hair from his forehead, and whispered words of encouragement. "Tomorrow we'll find a safe place to stay, and maybe even some work for me," she said, hoping the boy could feel her determination. He nodded, trusting her words as children do, and she felt a surge of strength. That trust, fragile and precious, was what kept her moving forward as they left the park. She noticed a building she had passed many times but never entered. A small sign read, "Community Resource Center." She hesitated, then decided to go inside. The door opened easily, and she was greeted by a warm, friendly voice. A woman behind the desk listened patiently as she explained their situation. After a few moments, she was offered temporary assistance, a small room for the night, some food and guidance on accessing programs for work and housing. Relief and gratitude flooded her heart. They had found a lifeline, and she clung to it with both hands. The room they were given was small but clean. She laid down a thin mattress for the boy, tucking him in and brushing his hair from his eyes. As he drifted off to sleep, she sat beside him, listening to his soft breathing. The weight of the day pressed on her, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a measure of peace. She allowed herself to close her eyes briefly, knowing she needed rest to face tomorrow's challenges. Later, she prepared a simple meal they had received. She reflected on the kindness of strangers. The woman at the center had offered help without judgment or hesitation, a reminder that humanity still existed, even in a world that often seemed indifferent. She realized that small acts of compassion could have a profound impact, changing the course of a person's life in ways that money or power could not. This thought gave her hope, not just for herself but for the boy, for the possibility of a brighter future. While they ate, she thought about the people she had noticed earlier, the man in the suit from the streets, and others who moved through life untouched by hardship. She wondered what it would take for them to understand lives like hers, the struggles faced by countless families living on the margins. She didn't expect them to change the world, but she hoped that awareness could spark empathy even in small ways. And perhaps, she thought, one day, someone with the means to help would notice her and her child. The boy finished eating and curled up against her again, content and safe. She held him close, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat, and whispered softly about the day ahead. Tomorrow, they would seek work. They would look for a more permanent place to stay, and they would continue moving forward. Each day was a step, each choice a bridge toward a better life. She reminded herself that progress didn't have to be grand. Small victories mattered, and they would carry them through. As evening approached, the center quieted down. Volunteers tidied up, prepared spaces for the night, and checked on families who were staying temporarily. She watched quietly, grateful for the structure and care provided. The contrast between this small haven and the chaotic streets outside was stark. But she took comfort in the fact that safe spaces existed. They didn't erase the struggles, but they offered respite, a moment to breathe, to plan, and to hope. She thought again of the boy, of how resilient he was, how much he had already endured in his short life. His laughter, his trust, his simple joys were reminders of why she persisted. Each day she kept moving, seeking shelter, seeking food, seeking safety. Was a day she preserved his innocence as much as she could. She promised herself that she would do everything possible to protect him, even when exhaustion and fear pressed down heavily on her. Later, she walked with the boy to the small courtyard outside the center. The drizzle had stopped completely, leaving the world washed clean, glimmering under the soft glow of streetlights. The boy chased after small insects and leaves, his laughter a delicate counterpoint to the quiet night. She watched him, feeling a sense of gratitude mixed with awe. He had endured so much, yet his spirit remained unbroken. And she drew strength from that. She reflected on her own journey. The months of struggle, the nights spent in fear, and the constant challenge of survival, each step forward, each decision made under pressure, had shaped her into someone more resilient, more determined, and more compassionate. She realized that the hardship, as painful as it was, had also given her clarity. It had taught her to value small victories, to recognize acts of kindness, to cherish moments of safety and joy. The boy ran back to her, holding a small leaf he had found. She smiled, taking it from him, and they shared a quiet moment of connection. She knew that these moments were fleeting, that life would continue to challenge them, but she also knew that they were essential. They were reminders that even in a difficult world, beauty and joy could be found in unexpected places. As the night grew darker, she guided the boy back to their room in the center. He yawned, rubbing his eyes, and she tucked him in carefully. She watched him sleep, marveling at his resilience and courage. The weight of responsibility pressed on her, but it was tempered by love and hope. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she felt ready to face them. They had survived so much already, and they would continue to move forward, step by step. Together, she sat quietly, planning the next day. There were phone calls to make, potential work opportunities to explore, and steps to take toward finding more stable housing. Each plan carried uncertainty, but she embraced it as part of life. Survival had taught her to adapt, to make the best of what was available, and to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. Outside, the city hummed softly, lights reflecting off wet streets and windows. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of connection to the world around her. Life was difficult, and the path ahead was uncertain, but she had a child to protect, a purpose that was unwavering. Each day brought challenges, yes, but also the possibility of growth, of finding safety, and of discovering moments of unexpected kindness. She rested for a while, leaning back against the wall, her eyes closed, thinking about the boy's laughter, the small victories of the day, and the hope that carried them forward. Tomorrow, they would continue their journey, facing the world together. And as she sat in quiet reflection, she understood that resilience was not about never feeling fear or exhaustion. It was about moving forward despite them, guided by love, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a parent and child. Morning came softly, the sunlight breaking through clouds that still lingered from the night's rain. She woke with a sense of determination, holding her child close, feeling the small, steady rhythm of his breathing. The room they had stayed in at the community center offered warmth and safety, and she breathed in relief for a moment, allowing herself to savor it. Today, she thought, they would take steps forward. The world outside might be unpredictable, but they would face it together. They had a simple breakfast, the boy eating slowly, savoring each bite. She watched him carefully, thinking about the long journey ahead. There was work to find a more permanent place to stay, and ways to rebuild some measure of stability. The challenges seemed enormous, but she focused on the immediate steps, knowing that small victories would accumulate over time. Once they were ready, she stepped outside, the city streets glistening in the fresh morning light. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. She held the boy's hand tightly, feeling the warmth of his small fingers, and walked toward the nearest job center. Every step was measured, each movement a reminder of her purpose, to keep her child safe, fed, and hopeful. The city felt different in the morning. People hurried to work, buses rattled along the streets, and shops opened their doors. She observed quietly, taking note of opportunities, signs for work, and places where she might find assistance. Every detail mattered. Every observation could lead to a small advantage. The boy walked beside her, occasionally pointing at birds or puddles, his laughter reminding her that even amidst struggle, joy could exist. They arrived at the job center, and she explained their situation to the staff. She spoke clearly, concisely, emphasizing her willingness to work, her skills, and her determination. The staff listened patiently, taking notes, offering guidance on available positions. She felt a flicker of hope. Opportunities, even small ones, were a chance to reclaim some stability. The boy sat nearby, quietly observing. And she felt grateful that he was safe and included, a constant reminder of why she persevered. Afterward, they walked to a nearby housing assistance office. The line was long and the wait was tiring, but she remained patient. She held the boy's hand, whispered encouragements, and kept her focus on the goal. They were guided through paperwork, advised on programs, and offered temporary housing options. Each step forward was a reminder that progress was possible, even if slow. She took careful notes, storing them mentally and physically, knowing that organization and persistence would be key. Outside the office, she paused, looking at the city around her. Life continued relentlessly, people moving with purpose and energy, most unaware of the quiet struggle of those like her. She felt a pang of isolation, but it was tempered by resolve. She had survived storms before, both literal and metaphorical, and each challenge had strengthened her. The bond with her child, the shared trust and love, gave her strength to face the unknown. They walked to a small park nearby, a brief respite before returning to the community center. The boy ran ahead, chasing after leaves and puddles, his laughter echoing through the quiet space. She watched, smiling despite fatigue. These moments of joy, however brief, were vital. They reminded her that life was not just about struggle, but about connection, love, and resilience. In the late afternoon, she returned to the community center with the boy. Carrying small groceries purchased with the little money she had managed to save, she prepared a modest meal, the boy helping in small ways, handing her utensils and smiling proudly. They ate together, sharing quiet conversation, laughter, and a sense of accomplishment. The day had been challenging, but they had taken steps forward. That progress, no matter how incremental, was significant. As evening approached, she reflected on the journey so far. The storms, the long nights and the rain, the moments of fear and uncertainty had all shaped her. She realized that strength was not about avoiding hardship, but enduring it, navigating it with courage, and emerging with lessons learned. She had learned patience, resourcefulness, and the value of kindness from both strangers and within herself. Later, she took the boy outside for a brief walk. The city bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. The air smelled of damp earth, a gentle reminder of the night's rain. The boy pointed at reflections in puddles, laughing at his own image. She smiled, feeling gratitude for the simple joys, for safety, for resilience. Each small moment of happiness, she understood, was a victory in itself. They passed a high-rise building, its windows reflecting the setting sun. Inside, a man in a suit moved briskly through the corridors, absorbed in his own world. She glanced at him briefly, noting the stark difference between his life and hers. Yet she did not dwell on envy. Instead, she focused on the path ahead, on the tangible steps she could take to create stability for herself and her child. Life was not about comparing struggles. It was about meeting challenges with determination and heart. Back at the center, she helped the boy settle into bed. She brushed his hair, whispered stories of bright skies and adventures, and watched him drift into sleep. She remained awake for a while, reflecting on the day, planning for the next, and quietly acknowledging her own resilience. The journey was far from over, but each day brought progress. Each day offered hope. And each day strengthened the bond with her child. As night deepened, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The rain had passed, leaving the city clean and fresh. She thought about the people she had encountered, kind staff at the center, neighbors who offered small gestures of help, strangers whose awareness and empathy could change lives. She realized that even in a world that often seemed indifferent, small acts of humanity could create ripples, changing futures in ways that mattered deeply. She thought about the boy, about his resilience, his trust, and his laughter. These were reminders of why she fought, why she persisted, why she endured. Every challenge, every step forward, Every moment of fear or uncertainty was framed by the unwavering love for her child. That love, she knew, was her greatest strength, her guiding force, her reason to continue. The night passed quietly, the city sleeping under a blanket of calm. She sat by the window, watching the reflections of streetlights on wet pavement, thinking about the journey ahead. There would be challenges, moments of fear, and nights of uncertainty, but she felt ready to face them. She had survived storms before, and she would continue to do so, guided by love, determination, and the hope that each day could bring new opportunities. As dawn approached, she prepared for another day. There were plans to make, tasks to complete, and steps to take towards stability and safety. Yet she carried a quiet sense of confidence. The boy was by her side, their bond unbroken, their spirits resilient. Together, they would navigate the unpredictable city, the challenges of survival, and the pursuit of a life with dignity and hope. She understood that progress might be slow, that life's storms might return, but she also understood the power of persistence. Each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. Each act of courage, each moment of kindness, each connection formed with others added strength to their journey. And with her child by her side, she felt a profound sense of purpose, a clear understanding of why she would endure, persevere, and continue moving forward as the city awakened. She stepped outside once more, ready to face whatever came next. The rain had left behind a clean, refreshed world, and she felt a similar clarity within herself. The boy held her hand, a small, warm presence that anchored her. Each day would bring challenges, yes, but also opportunities, moments of hope, and reasons to continue. And she would meet each day with courage, love, and unwavering determination, knowing that together they could face anything the world placed before them.